You know, there's this really specific kind of fear that like only shows up when something like becomes something you don't recognize anymore, right? I mean, we love to think of our homes as these like super secure fortresses, but history, oh man, history tells us that a locked door is really just a barrier if the danger is like outside, you know? So today's file, oh wow, it's one that like authors would totally label as too unbelievable for any novel, right? But you know what? The archives, they don't lie. Those police reports from 1987 contain details that like no horror movie would ever dream of making up. We're going to dive into this case just like the Bone family experienced it. To respect the privacy of the individuals involved in this case, the likenesses of the characters shown in this video have been modified. While the names and events are based on true documented accounts, the visuals serve as a dramatic representation of the story.
To understand the horror that unfolded in Pepperell, Massachusetts, you have to look at the Bowens. In 1986, Brian Bowen was a man trying to survive a tragedy. He had recently lost his wife to cancer, leaving him a single father to two daughters, Annie and Jessica. They moved into this house looking for a fresh start, a sanctuary to grieve in peace. But as any collector of dark stories knows, grief has a way of masking the sounds of something much more predatory. It started with a hairbrush left on a counter that would turn up under a bed. A window Brian was certain he had latched would be found swinging open in the morning. At first, Brian blamed it on the girls' trauma. He thought they were acting out. But then the girls came to him with a request that changed everything. They wanted to use a Ouija board to talk to their mother. The girls sat in the basement, lit a few candles, and asked into the darkness, "Are you here?" They didn't get a message on the board. They got something much more visceral. As soon as they blew out the candles and headed to their rooms, the tapping started. Rhythmically, it followed them up the stairs, vibrating through the drywall. For the girls, this was a miracle. They thought their mother was responding. They would spend hours sitting against the walls, whispering questions, and listening for those ghostly taps in return. But when they told Brian he didn't see a miracle, he saw two girls losing their grip on reality. He told them to stop. He told them ghosts weren't real, but the house was about to prove him wrong. By January 1987, the spirit turned mean. This wasn't a comforting mother anymore. This was an invader. Brian would come home to find the furniture rearranged into strange, unsettling patterns. Silverware would be missing from the drawer, only to be found tucked into the back of a closet. And then came the kitchen incident, every cabinet door standing wide open in the dead of night, as if the house itself was screaming at them. The final straw for Brian's skepticism was the writing. He walked into the basement and found words scrawled in a thick red substance that looked like blood, but smelled like ketchup. It read, "Come find me. I'm in the closet." Brian was furious. He thought a local teenager was playing a sick joke. He didn't realize that the joke was a death trap. On December 8th, the mystery ended. Brian heard a crash from the master bedroom. He grabbed a heavy wrench, sprinted upstairs, and kicked the door open. In the corner of the room stood a figure. It was wearing his late wife's wedding dress. The white lace was tattered and stained. The figure wore a blonde wig and had its face caked in thick, white theatrical makeup, making it look like a porcelain doll that had been left in the rain. And in its hand was a hatchet. Brian lunged. He was fighting for his life and his daughter's. He managed to grab the lace of the dress, but the intruder was unervingly fast. It slipped through his fingers like smoke, dove into a small linen closet, and slammed the door. Brian ripped that door open a heartbeat later, and the closet was empty. There were no secret doors, no trap doors, just solid wood. The man in the dress had seemingly walked through the wall. The family fled. They stayed with relatives, too terrified to return. But weeks later, Brian drove past the house and saw a flickering light in the upstairs window. When the police arrived, they didn't find a ghost. They found a nightmare. Behind the heavy water heater in the basement, they discovered a loose panel. Behind that panel was a network of crawl spaces, some only 12 inches wide, that ran through the entire skeleton of the house. Tucked into one of these gaps was 17-year-old Daniel LaPlante. He had been living there for months. He had drilled dozens of tiny peepholes into the walls. He had spent his nights sitting in the darkness, watching the girls sleep, watching Brian grieve, and eating their food while they were only inches away on the other side of the drywall. Daniel LaPlante was arrested that night. But as the archives show, this was only the beginning of his shadow. Shortly after being released, he would go on to commit a crime so much darker that the town of Pepperell would never truly recover.
This has been 3 a.m. Stories. Tonight, when you hear a sound behind your headboard, don't assume it's the wind. It might just be someone waiting for you to look away. I'll see you in the archives.